characterized as humanitarian free and open source software, or HFOSS, that's used by emergency responders to help out in emergency situations, to like get situational awareness by mapping out like, oh, here's where the stand-up center is located for those of you who are dealing as a response to a hurricane or something, to quickly map out where things are and what resources are available at each place, and said, hey, we want to map resources, we want to expose things and start conversations. So like this same software could be useful to us. We selected of those systems the ones that seemed most relevant, and then we did a trial deploy of all of the relevant systems to see which ones were actually dead in the water and no longer maintained, which ones seemed like they could scale the best for us. So my student got a lot of experience in doing new things for him as a second-year computer science student, in terms of standing up virtual machines and configuring systems, which he hadn't really done previously. So our project accomplishments are that we surveyed these tools, we came up with recommendations, we assessed limitations of the prior prototype, we enumerated a feature list, we surveyed HFOSS, and we made an initial decision to say, there's a piece of software out there called Ushahidi that could be used to support this concept of operations for Waters Rise. We did a trial deployment of Ushahidi, and we started the process of trying to get a prototype site live at Sonoma State. And we also investigated options in terms of hosted solutions, in case we didn't want to run our own server, if we were interested in having a more robust and maintained solution. And there are hosted solutions through Ushahidi, so that if we wanted something that was exposed to the public that became a resource that they could rely on, we could actually transition it over to be hosted somewhere else where they would make sure it could be live all the time. We started the process of getting a self-hosted solution with IT, and we have that available preliminarily. We're still working on standing things up. For example, I just realized in a production deployment, we actually need extra DNS names. I put in the request today to try to get the two pieces of software, the front end and the back end, having the correct names. So getting our initial prototype up and running so that y'all can experience it is ongoing work. The initial prototype we had running was just on our own machines to say, okay, this works, we can see how to configure it. So transitioning our prototype to be live for the public to poke at it is kind of TBD. But this is the look and feel of what Ushahidi offers. As you can see, it just puts place markers where you'd like. There's a way to categorize posts. There's it's very responsive on a mobile device, and there's also a mobile client, other than just having the mobile friendly web client. Sorry, I got distracted for a minute. So I don't really have a live demo to show you. But this is kind of the look and feel. It's very similar to the first prototype that was generated last year, in that it is dots on a map. But it is different from the first prototype in that these dots on a map come from people who could be collecting data in the field using a mobile device. These dots on a map can go through a workflow where we can decide what gets published to the public versus what is being held for review. These dots on a map come with metadata attached, like pictures. And these dots on a map come in a mobile-friendly version with a fluid format. My student learned a whole lot. He had not used a virtual machine before doing this. So just standing up the variety of software he got to experience was a huge learning curve. I think he said that he benefited a lot in terms of maturing his understanding about how something would be trial deployed and how something would be tested as software. He also was left with a very conceptually difficult problem where he wasn't quite sure, he's never had a project before where the end result wasn't a right answer that a professor already knew how to check. So the amorphous nature, the open-ended nature, the variety of ways in which he could help shape the direction of the project was very new and exciting. It's also very frustrating, to never know if you've got the right answer yet, because you're dealing with a project in which there isn't a right answer at the end necessarily. The next step for the project, I think, is to continue getting a prototype up so that stakeholders can poke at it and get a sense of what it could offer and start asking the right questions in terms of capacity. Oh, how do we want to use this? Who wants to see this? How should it be formatted to be best for them? I think that understanding comes more easily when you get to interact with something and start asking about its potential in that way. Also, getting the data into it is a little tough because the data that we collected from Team 2 in this past year came with some beautiful pictures that are a little too large to be automatically turned into reports through Ushahidi. So I'm trying to develop some scripts to make data ingest a little bit easier. I already have scripts that I can run on the picture that pulls out all the geolocation data and turns it into reports, but I also need to figure out a way to make it that resize the photos so that they can be shown in Ushahidi. This can be turned into logic that Ushahidi can do for us. Hopefully it's also something that the mobile app just does for us, that if they had used that to begin with as an afterthought, that it would have resized the photos and uploaded them to reports correctly, but I'm not sure about that. I haven't actually tried it. There was also a question about when there were photos that might involve faces, that a nice capability would be automatically blurring faces. That isn't here yet. And I think that there is an opportunity to explore that as both a contribution to Ushahidi, as a Ushahidi plugin, or something that we can figure out how to do as part of approving a post to be made public, that we could download it, run it through something that blurs it that I have yet to create, and then upload it back. So all those are kind of interesting things to explore. I don't know if I've went over time, and I don't know if we're doing questions. I will stop talking and let Carrie tell me what to do next.
Mark, that was perfect. If anybody has questions for him, I think it would be best to put those in the chat. Go ahead and do it now so you don't forget, and I can keep a list of them, but we're going to save the questions until the end. But please do go ahead and type those in now, everybody. So I am going to do my best now to show you a presentation by student Daryl Manny, who unfortunately had an emergency he had to run to, but he did send me slides. So let me make sure that I can get these up and running. Oh, and I cannot do it without going into full screen. So I'll just do it this way. I will share my screen and then I will go into slideshow mode. Does that look okay to everybody? Okay, great. All right, so Daryl Manny was the student lead in Team 2. It's automatically advancing. That's not fun either. Let's see. Okay. We'll just do our best here. Goodness, every PowerPoint is made differently, isn't it? You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to show it to you this way. I apologize for the thumbnails on the side. Okay, so the purpose of the team that was field and interview team led by Daryl Manny is they were doing two things. So they were following up on two different projects from the first year. The first one was what Mark just presented about. So that was a perfect intro. So one of the purposes was to identify homeless encampments and clean water sources for those people and actually everybody, right? So they actually went out and boots on the ground, took photos, took data, or a field team, found locations, took information down about those locations, about where restrooms were, where water fountains were, where showers were, and then a lot of information about those facilities. When are they open? Are they only open to customers? What kinds of facilities are nearby? And then the second thing they did was following up on a different team from year one. And that was more the knowledge map question of aligning the universe and where are all the different organizations working on these issues and how do they overlap and how can we get them to all be in one database, all know about each other and work together. And so they interviewed some agencies and to try and increase awareness of available resources to each other, and then hopefully to the community at large after that to develop this list. So then the third piece is, after doing all this, collecting and analyzing some data about these two pieces. Goal 1, demonstrate the use of QGIS mapping tool to map resources, as I said. Goal 2, conduct interviews from remaining organizations within the database, because the first year they only could get to maybe 15% of this huge 150 organization list. So this second year, they chipped away at that list a bit more. They cold called people. That's their method for this one. And then for the second goal with the map, they used a camera phone to map both homeless encampments, water resources, and public restrooms. And here's some of what they found. They added locations to the map from Roner Park, Santa Rosa, and Forestville. They specifically looked at places that we directed them to that might have more of that overlap between water resources in the environment and people experiencing homelessness on the ground. They found that 30% of locations with smaller restrooms had restaurants nearby. 16% of locations contained a changing table. That's another resource we don't even think about. One location had a shower facility. Wow, only one. Roberts Lake encampment contained stalls and a restaurant across the street. Downtown Santa Rosa public restroom facility it looks like had a disabled access facility in close proximity. And there was a trend showing public resources near the borders of residential and commercial areas. All right, homeless service provider agency versus healthcare facilities. So I am guessing this is because in that 150 list long of organizations, there are a wide range of organizations, and it seems like they kind of split them into these two groups, which maybe showed some relationships and had some places where they didn't overlap. So it looks like both housing services and healthcare facilities were funded with grants and donors, did not have issues with cross-sector collaboration, and they want to ensure the best quality of care. But it looks like they diverge on some other issues. So housing services, they provide housing programs, money and time goes towards homelessness. The resources are food, mental health, substance abuse services, and they offer financial assistance, education, intensive care management, and housing navigation and stabilization. For healthcare facilities, it looks like they provide additional programs, food, shelter, screenings, and treatment with no cost. They can be confidential services. They welcome everyone despite being uninsured, will help reduce costs to fit budget, and go beyond clinical care. So those are some of Daryl's findings. I wish him health, and we can hopefully hear from him after the presentation. If anyone has questions, feel free to type them in for him, and I'm happy to pass those along. And we would still really like to get feedback about what his team did. All right, next up, we have Dr. Emily Acosta Lewis. Take it away, Emily.
Can you enable screen share?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You should be good to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Acosta Lewis. I'm a professor in communication and media studies, and I oversaw this project. One of the classes I teach every semester is a student-run PR agency, and so my students work with real-world clients, nonprofit clients, and do PR work for them, PR, marketing, social media, kind of whatever needs to be done. So that's kind of the background on how we got involved with this project. Nearly all of my students graduated who were on this project, which is why none of them are here. And so this is the presentation that sort of wraps up what we did last year. And then I'll talk a little bit about what the plans are for this year. We have another team that's working on this work that's currently in my PR class right now. So the big thing was looking at the communications and trying to figure out, honestly, we took a long time trying to sort of get our heads around what Rising Waters was and what the goals were and who the players were. It took us a while to sort of figure all of that out. But one of the big things we wanted to do is demystify the misconceptions around individuals experience homelessness and help address the environmental concerns associated with this. And so the group did many different things. They put together a communication strategy. They started creating infographic, social media content, web content. They did a strategic media outreach campaign. They looked at local and regional outreach, and they did some Sonoma State Star coverage that's on our campus. So this is kind of our timeline. And in February to March, there was lots of research trying to figure out what to do, how to move forward, what the best plan of action would be. In April, they worked with Earth Day and did some media outreach on that and did some marketing collateral pieces. In May, they helped implement the program and did some social media content and media outreach. And then in the summer, there was the project wrap up, putting together the media product library. They also presented this project at the undergraduate research symposium, which I think all of us did. And then July and August is sort of the continuation, and that's where my students now are kind of taking over things. Some of the things that this group did was create a media product library. So start creating social media content based on what Rising Waters was doing in the Waters Collaborative and trying to leverage what we're doing on this campus to try to let people know off and on campus what Rising Waters and CEI are all about. Public education campaigns. So they put together a formal PR proposal for a public education campaign, specifically targeting misconceptions around people who experience homelessness and NIMBYism. They also did an Earth Day campaign. So they came up with a communication strategy for CEI's Earth Day activities. They did some tabling collateral for the event, media outreach, and communication needs beyond just the campus. They also did a media outreach campaign. And so they did some strategic media outreach to try to get some attention for Rising Waters and the efforts that CEI is doing on campus. So this is their media outreach campaign, and here are the different different media outlets that they reached out to in the area. So they focused on these sort of 5 key components. So they looked at educational outreach, environmental outreach, humanitarian and local issues, and then Earth Day. So all of the outreach that they did with these were slanted and framed as one of these 5 areas. So if it was educational, they were looking at the collaborative element between Rising Waters and SSU. If it was environmental, they were looking at the environmental concerns surrounding water quality and homelessness. That was humanitarian. The articles were sort of slanted in terms of improving the living conditions of those experience homelessness. And then in terms of local issues, kind of spotlighting what's going on in our community in Sonoma County and the intersection between the water quality and homelessness issues here. And then for Earth Day, they tied it into community efforts and what was already going on in the community in terms of leaving the earth better than we found it. So the group learned a lot. All of them were coming in from not knowing anything about this issue. nearly all of them were from outside of Sonoma County, so they didn't even really fully understand Sonoma County and what kind of efforts were kind of going on here. So I think that was really helpful. I think what surprised them was how hard it was to wrap their head around an issue like this, right? Like if you're doing public relations for a brand or a product or a celebrity or whatever it might be, it's easier to sort of sell that, right? But this is like, you're not trying to necessarily sell people on anything, and you're not trying to get people, you're trying to get people to be more aware, right? And that sort of informational, educational component, I think, was hard for them, and also harder to sort of measure what the outcome is, right? Did you reach your goal? Did you educate more people? That kind of thing. What's next is we have a team of 5 undergraduates who are working in my PR class, and they are taking a little bit of a different approach. They're kind of working more with CEI as opposed to Rising Waters. And they are planning to do a golf fundraiser in the spring. So one of our students is on the golf team, and she has all the connections at Foxtail because she basically lives there. And so she was like, let's consider doing this. So they are in the process of planning that right now. They are also thinking about what they can do on campus to kind of get people involved, or just to let people know what CEI is. I feel like there are certain students in certain majors who are probably in the know about CEI, and then there are many who don't know anything about it, right? Or don't understand what it is. So trying to reach specifically those students on campus. They are also working on, I'm looking at their proposals from their presentation they just gave in class the other day. They also want to just humanize the homeless population too. I think that's something that they're really sort of interested in. So fundraising, trying to get rid of misconceptions, right? Trying to get people on board with sort of the greater good idea. They are also going to continue doing social media and collateral pieces and more outreach in the community. So those are the kind of big things that they are working on this semester into next semester. Many of them will continue on for the whole year.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, it's been really great meeting with your students because they have so many, they want to do way more than they have time for. And that's just, it's just a fantastic group. I know they were thinking about maybe actually implementing some of the plans that were created last year for campaigns for communication about rising water. So I'm excited to see where it goes. All right, let's move on to Chris Hawley talking about Nadia Parekh's social entrepreneurship class.
Okay, let's see how this goes. Okay. There it goes. Okay, can people see my screen okay? Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm Chris. I work with Carrie at CEI. And this was interesting. This was done a little bit differently from some of the other classes we've had, in the sense that the steering committee was involved in trying to get business students involved in the Rising Waters effort. And the point is here that, you know, we need a whole society solution if we're going to tackle some of these quote unquote wicked problems. And so if we can engage the business community, that can be very powerful. And there we go. So their focus was really in the category of aligning the universe. And so, you know, the overall question is how we can get everybody working together to solve this problem. And their specific piece of the question really was, how can we engage business students and the business community? So these organizations in these slides are all sort of NGO and public service types of organizations, and we're trying to bring in the business community and leverage their knowledge and their funding and their passion. So from the student experience point of view, this was a junior, senior level business class in social entrepreneurship. And the students got to meet a couple of times with the entire steering committee who are experts in this area and interview them and ask for their feedback and get their experiences. And then they got to study this homeless water quality issue in detail and present their findings and their possible solutions to the experts. So it was really kind of a soup to nuts crash course for these economic students. And my personal hope was that they would think about business and the economy in a slightly different way than is maybe typically thought of, as you get an organization and your main goal is to simply increase profit. And they were really focused on this social entrepreneurship aspect where you give back to the community. I'd like to again thank the steering committee that showed up and donated their time to engage these students, especially during COVID, because we were all masked in front of a class and it wasn't the most comfortable situation in the world. And so the students approached this through a business lens, using what they were calling gap analysis. And the gap analysis basically identified challenges, what's happening with homeless and why it's happening. Impact gaps, where can we do better? Where can we provide camps for homeless people? How can we provide housing? How can we help them get back on their feet? And then solution mapping, how we might go about providing that. And this sort of type of a gap analysis, this framing, is something that's commonly done among various disciplines, including the business community. And the end goal was to really frame it so we could go out and shop this around to talk to local businesses. And their general findings, right? So this is a laundry list. All of the students and the folks they talked to strongly endorsed efforts to provide hygiene and clean water, right? Which is what we're about. Clean water is a human right. It's been recognized as a human right by the state of California. And so trying to provide clean water facilities and hygiene facilities is actually kind of enshrined in state and national law at the moment. They also found, and this goes to Emily's point in her campaign, that misinformation about homeless populations and where they come from was a major issue, even among some advocates within Sonoma County. So there are a lot of myths about violence or how many homeless individuals are experiencing mental health issues or they come from outside of the county. All of those are myths that really need to be addressed. And of course, they all found that funding is a major issue, which is one reason to engage the business community. So promoting more funding without realigning the tax structure or the engagement of the business community may not be sustainable because NGOs and local government organizations are asked to do more and more without additional funding or personnel, right? There's a huge amount of unfunded mandates, as they call it. And so they're recommending that we engage the business community to help support existing NGOs. And two ways of doing that are a purpose-driven corporation, where you encourage a business to donate a certain amount of its proceeds to a social issue. And in return for that, you help provide advertising for them, or they do their own advertising, and then local people go to that business because they see it doing something good. Or you create a framework where businesses can join this framework in a sustainable enterprise fashion. And then some of that money could perhaps be donated. So those were their general findings. Now, into the future, and this is more of a personal view, so any mistakes here are definitely mine and not Nadia's. In the short term, they recommended creating a centralized meeting or collaboration space for case managers or advocates working on homeless and water quality issues. And in some sense, this is an extension of what we think the Rise in Waters Collaborative has done, in the sense that there are folks that are very busy, and to have them the folks actually take the time to focus on these interconnected issues is very difficult. And so if we can make some inroads into expanding these meetings and having them more often, that might be helpful. Like I said, we can engage single businesses in specific issues. or create a larger business network. And that's really interesting. So as you guys might know, we have the Go Local program, where if you go to a local store and you flash your card, you get a discount on buying your vegetables, for example. There's the Green Business program, which I know Roanoke Park was heavily involved in, where a business gets a green certification and then they may get free advertising from the city. If we could work with the Board of Supervisors or with cities to expand those programs and maybe have businesses, instead of getting a discount on your vegetables, maybe that little bit of money goes to a fund and the businesses kind of direct where that money goes. That could be an interesting way to explore addressing issues in the county. Long term, it would be interesting to refine business education and maybe redefine what we mean by capitalism, because there's a mismatch, especially the way it's practiced in the United States, between how things are funded and the issues that need to be addressed. And there's a lot in there we can play with that I'm happy to talk about later. And with that, I will end and be ready to take more questions.
All right. Thank you so much for all of those presentations. And we are actually on time. This is going well. Thank you, everybody. So I think the first thing that I'd like to do before opening it up to the audience is get the steering committee's feedback. So we actually have some steering committee members here today. If you would like to turn your videos on and introduce yourselves, that would be wonderful. And then each of you, if you'd like to say something about your experience as part of this project, or questions for the teams, or ideas you have, or things that you'd like to see going forward, I'd like to get the steering committee's feedback and also introduce you to everybody. So I know that Andy is here, if maybe you'd like to say something. I know that Mike said he would join at 2 o'clock, so he'll be joining then. And do we have anybody else here right now? It looks like Andy, you get the first go.
All right. Well, thank you, Carrie. Hello, everybody. Andy Rogers. Getting phone calls that I want to push off. I'm the executive director of the Russian River Watershed Association, and we became involved, I guess, a little over 2 years ago, and invited Sonoma Water was really the initial spark with Sonoma State to get the program going, and so the idea was with our association being watershed wide, so up into Mendocino County, so including the city of Ukiah and the watershed area in Mendocino, and then the area in Sonoma County. And the watershed is roughly about half and half in Mendocino County and Sonoma County, which many people don't know, but all the jurisdictions within it, and see if there was interest in our association kind of providing a bit of regional context to what the student faculty teams are working on. And so originally started off with Dr. Luke coming and talking to our board, which is the elected officials from all those agencies, and the subject that we're all working on and you all have been working on for the last couple of years came from that, the nexus of water quality and people experiencing homelessness. And this was pre-COVID when it all started, and we had all kinds of grand plans for how this thing was going to work out, and then of course everything changed. And in the silver lining, in my opinion, just to share a little bit of my experiences, I was very worried that it was really going to kind of derail this really cool idea and program. And in some ways, it allowed us to focus. And being somewhat of an observer, I'm on the steering committee, but really you guys are doing the work. In some ways, it's such a big subject that it seemed to kind of provide a little bit of focus, because we couldn't do all the things that we were thinking of, and in a lot of ways. And so it allowed the focus to be in research, and it allowed the collaboration to really be established. And of course, it was a virtual collaboration at the time, and it went forward in year one surprisingly successfully. And what we really wanted to do is show our municipal partners and member agencies the value of academia and kind of the community engines of the cities and the counties, et cetera, working together, and how it can take something that's as immensely complex as this subject, involving about every aspect of our social environment, as you can imagine, as well as environment. You know, really kind of getting an understanding and looking at the misperceptions that you all have been talking about, and really how you get your head around it, but then how you start identifying what the data gaps are, what the data overlaps are, and what are the efforts that, how can we do this better? So now 2.5 years in, I feel like, you know, we're starting to get some clarity around the issues. There's a lot of folks saying the same thing, whether it's businesses classes or in different types of, and so that's always a good sign. We start hearing common themes coming from different you know, perspectives and information sources. So that usually gives a lot of strength. And so there's to kind of, I don't want to talk too much, but you know, where I'm hoping, I think, and this is just me, I'm very much of somebody who likes to be on a journey with everybody. So this is just my idea, and I'm easily convinced to go have another idea. But you know, really applying this knowledge and the you know, the mapping that's happened, the data gathering that's happened, the interviews that have happened, and all the smart people that have been working on it. How can we take that and apply it to something that's really a tangible, something that we can say, look what we learned, or look what we found out, or look what we did. And if we can identify a couple of nuggets like that, I think it would be extremely helpful to keep the interest and the broad support that is currently in the room. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, is how do we turn this into something that's valuable, which is why I asked some of the questions. What are the specific things that we might be able to look at, that we might be able to utilize? Those are really valuable things to share. When somebody hasn't been involved in this subject, it takes a while to get them up to speed. And sometimes just having little nuggets of, here's what was derived out of this, gets them, oh, okay, I'm starting to get it. And you won't have to have 2.5 years to get them where you are. So anyway, so did I cover what you were hoping, Carrie?
That was wonderful, Andy. And actually, I want to bring up the question that you put in the chat earlier. Going back to find it, you asked if there was a portfolio of the outreach content that can be viewed from Emily's students, and did all the publications listed on the slide carry some of the content? If I understand that second question.
Yeah, in other words, did the Tribune have any of those articles or pieces, or is that the target?
I think that's who they sent press releases out to. I don't know that they got placement in those, but I do have a folder full of all kinds of content that they created.
Awesome.
And it's a shareable Google Drive folder, so it's easy to share.
Definitely. I believe the steering committee might already have access, but if not, we can definitely give that to you. And I have a couple that I'd actually like to put up on the screen right now as a segue, because I see that somebody else asked this question. Can you explain some of the general misconceptions? I'm working near Portland, Oregon, where we're hearing a lot of concerns about water quality and don't have much data. So I wanted to just pop up on the screen real quick 2 things that were created by the Emily's team. So here's just an example of a social media thing that someone can just put out real quick. So what's a myth? Providing resources to people experiencing homelessness will cost the county too much. But the fact is that what the team investigating the different options for restrooms or not providing restrooms actually is, found that the cost of doing nothing and not providing restrooms can be very high. So if you don't help with restroom facilities for people experiencing homelessness, you're at risk of health hazards like hepatitis A outbreaks. You're at risk of being sued by the Clean Water Act. You have to pay for cleanups that can be extremely expensive. So this is just one example of the type of content they might put out. There's one other that I wanted to share that this is more of a flyer. So this one is misconceptions about individuals experiencing homelessness. And so it's a nice flyer that they created that could be printed and passed out. And I hope that answers some of the question about what some of the misconceptions are. Emily, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that's good. I was actually just looking through the folder to see if there's any other collateral materials that might be worthwhile to pull up.
Got it. All right, I'll stop sharing now. All right. Well, it looks like we still don't have Mike in the meeting. So I think if there's anything that Chris wants to say, I kind of see you raising your hand there.
Yeah, just sort of not to take up everybody else's question time, but one of the interesting things to Andy's point about, if we can synthesize things and apply it to something real or something that's higher visibility. The census information of the organizations, working on homelessness, for example. I had a meeting, gosh, a while ago, with Chris Corsi from the Board of Supervisors. And we were talking about the KPMG report, which the board paid KPMG, a big bad analysis company, to go out and look at homeless issues in Sonoma County. And some of what we've done actually is at the point where we could wrap it up and document it and submit it as addendums to this report. And I haven't talked to them about that process yet, but it would help the Board of Supervisors and the cities in general to understand the problem, maybe understand some of these connections we're finding moving forward.
I see that, Andy, you had one more question about if the water quality testing that was referenced in one of the slides is taking place. And that is something that's taking place this fall. So Chris might tell us a little bit about that at the end. He's going to tell us about some upcoming work right before we wrap up today. Thank you, Emily. So she just linked to the collateral document from her students. So that has that media library in it. Perfect. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in there. Okay, I think we'll open up to audience questions now until Mike Thompson shows up. So I started compiling them, but please feel free and either raise your hand and ask it out loud. That's also great, or you can type it in the chat and I'll ask it for you. But if you want to actually have a conversation with the presenter or a steering committee member, it's fine to actually speak up as well. Okay, so one question we got is, this was towards Mark. I was thinking about the potential usefulness regarding the public restrooms for both the unhoused as well as tourists, and would be interested to know where we can access this tool when it becomes available. So I guess that's more of a comment, but is there anything you'd like to say to that?
I would love to know, I would love to learn some ideas for how that data could be organized to be most useful to tourists. I was going to try to expose restrooms, changing tables as all like explorable things, like family bathrooms as things that are kind of hard to find and you don't always know where they are. If also an explorable item is just like water fountains. If there are other like ideas of general utility, I'd love to kind of make the prototype that will be stood up explorable in those ways, as a sense of like, oh yeah, that's how that would be experienced, or also to get feedback on like, oh, it sounded like a good idea, but it's kind of clunky. That's not the right flow.
And this is Michael's question, who has his hand up. So yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is Michael Mactasy. I'm an analyst for the County Administrator's Office. I just joined a couple months ago. I'm also the ombudsman for the Russian River TMDL program for pathogens. And so I'm very interested in all of this. I just found out about it today. I'm thrilled that this has been happening because homeless encampments have been identified as a potential source of pathogens that we're looking to address. And so all this work is just excellent, and I'm very excited by it. And Mark, with your tool, I feel like it could potentially provide a helpful solution, if not even a part of a solution, by providing a lot of information to people that need it, whether it's the homeless or whether it's tourists. And what I was, feedback for your question is the way I thought it might be useful is somebody's coming to our county to float down the river. Where are the bathrooms? Where can they wash up? Where can they, get out of the river in an easy way so that we're not finding pathogens, getting back into our water? For homeless, similar concept, but not necessarily right along the river, but maybe further in, where they can use the facilities. And I think having a tool that's easily accessible online would help the people that are actually accessing it, that want to use those facilities, but also the people that perhaps have businesses along the river. It'll inform them about where these facilities are. So when people come up to their establishment, they can direct them to the right place. And I don't know anything right now, and I'm still new to the county, new to this. But this is as close as I've come to finding anything that has looked at this in this way and put together this information in a potentially really, really valuable and useful way. And so that's how I would love to see it. And I'm hoping to create a website where people can come to and find some information. And this is the kind of information I would love to link to.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of people with responses to that. One thing that Director Claudia Luke noted is it's important to note that the original idea for this project was actually to find where services are needed. So we can identify where they already are. So where aren't they? And that's actually one of the keys here. Chris, you wanted to say something about this.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, that's definitely the other purpose of this. So we kind of have a foot on both horses with this project.
Yeah, no, it's great I'm so glad you found out about this, Michael. And I did see that Katie raised your hand. Did you have a response to this as well?
And I had an additional question as well. Thanks. Yeah, I also just found out about this today. I think it was on the Ecolog listserv and I saw it and came. So I'm up in Oregon in a suburb of Portland, and this is a huge topic that comes up a lot and we don't have a lot of answers. So I was excited to learn anything that you all have learned down there. And following on what you're just talking about with the resources, something that we've learned as well, when there are resources like public bathrooms or waste disposal, if they're, dumpsters that people can use, are extremely useful for the houseless communities, but also for the house communities and all sorts of other folks. And that's a general community need. So I think about, for example, I had posted here about delivery drivers. My husband's a delivery driver, and he doesn't have, he can't keep going into stores all the time to go to the bathroom while he's out working and, not buying something. And so they're expected to just pee in a bottle, right? And that's just what they do all day, every day, all year long. And in Portland, when they started putting out porta potties for the houseless community, he was like, wow, this is great. I can actually pee with dignity during my workday. So just thinking about with the waste disposal as well, some dumpsters were put out near the houseless encampments, and they ended up getting taken away because they were getting overwhelmed with garbage from the housed community, people getting rid of mattresses and furniture and large items that they didn't, if someone doesn't have a car, how do they get to the dump? It's expensive to get rid of, so there was sort of this need. And it was ironic that then the unhoused community couldn't use it because the housed community was overwhelming it. So just sort of thinking about basic human needs of clean water, bathrooms, and waste disposal that everyone can benefit from, and how can we sort of fund that at the whole community level rather than individually.
Katie, I think you're hitting on so many issues
Yeah.
at the same time, which is some of the misconceptions, right? So one thing that's taking place with the water quality sampling this fall is we're working with the city of Santa Rosa to actually do upstream, midstream, and downstream sampling around encampments and then in control areas to actually see, is this, what is the actual effect of this community on the water quality? Because there's also people that just party and use the water and throw their trash in it. And, so we want to get that information and not make assumptions. Like, we wouldn't know who's putting the trash in that dumpster you were just talking about, right? And then another point that you bring up is when we help one member of society, we help everybody. And so it's really something we should all be taking more seriously, and something that that's one of the powers of the cross-disciplinary approach here, right? Is getting these different agencies, different disciplines involved. And maybe it's a funding stream, right? If tourism gets excited about it, if we can get delivery driver groups, I don't know, but right, there's a lot of creative solutions here that I'm hearing come out of this conversation. So thank you so much for your input. And Michael, did you have something to reply to?
I do. It's kind of connected because everything here is connected, but with the original idea of identifying the needs, actually, I'm really thrilled about that too, because where there is a need, we need to fill a gap. And one of the things I'm going to be looking at is how do we fill those gaps? And so if there's a study done, if we know where things are and we know where things are needed, for me personally, I can take that information and I can look for opportunities to either try to find money or to try to find resources to try to fill those gaps along the river so that we have those facilities, especially if they're working. Like if we have water quality samples that show that this is actually working, that's going to be really helpful in gaining additional resources and implementing something like that. And so I would be very interested in all of that information, not only to provide to the public, but also for me in my role to try to fill those gaps and to make it all better too. In direct relation to filling the gaps, there is sometimes a resistance to helping the homeless community, because if you provide a facility, then maybe homeless are going to come and people don't want it in their backyard, which is why I really like the media campaign that Dr. Lewis put out. And one thing, I couldn't access it because I need a Google sign-on. I don't have it through my work, but I'd be interested to see something further along those lines, if there was interest in doing it, to provide some sort of media to the areas that we need to fill the gaps, to let that community know that, hey, this isn't so bad, and to show them how it helps and how it's not going to hurt them. Because then even if we know where the gaps are, let's say we have funding, if we've got public resistance to doing that, that's a hurdle too. And a media campaign to help with that really helps kind of seal the deal and get it done. So again, I love how it's taking multi angles at this problem, and I'm very interested to see it continue.
Yeah, Chris, please reply.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think that's interesting. If there's something that we've done and we can show that it's not too bad, and just I'm sure you already know this, Mike, but one of the examples we've been using was the city of Santa Rosa using Finley Park and establishing the homeless encampment, that was patrolled, and the tents were all nice, and we have pictures of that. And so that's kind of one of the examples, coming right out of the city that we use for different people. And the neighbors seemed to really, once it was installed and it worked, of course, people didn't have a problem with it, and it seemed to go really well. And so I think that's really been a huge success story coming out of your city.
Yeah, and it's definitely one thing that Dr. Acosta Lewis's team has been discussing, are different ways to get the word out. So there were some ideas about possibly showing these slides before city council meetings, possibly contacting one key player in each of the main Sonoma County communities, maybe making videos So it's all about, who do we want to reach and how can we use these to actually reach those people with the information they need. So right on the money there. Katie, did you have something to say?
Yeah, thanks. And I just posted in the chat a link to a blog post that we wrote recently about water quality and houselessness. And there are still a lot of questions, but in general, the only sampling we've done so far is sort of our background ambient sampling and looking at which water in the streams and which water quality parameters are of concern. We're going to start doing some targeted around where there are a lot of people living outside. But in that ambient sampling, we really weren't seeing a noticeable increase around the houseless encampments that is often assumed. We weren't seeing big bacteria spikes or, anything else. And I would say it's probably the number one concern we get from the community. They're like, hey, why is there all this trash in the creek? And all these people are probably pooping in the creek and it's terrible. And when we look at the water quality data, the things that we're most concerned about are copper coming off of brake pads from cars and 6 ppd quinone coming from car tires and pesticides coming from lawns. It's really not the stuff coming from where these people are living. And sure, trash isn't great and there's probably some poop in the creek, but when we find those bacteria spikes and have chased them, they're usually from a failed septic tank or a cross connection where something got hooked up wrong from a housed person's water pipe. So just trying to sort of address some of the biases that that's what we see. If you go out and you look at the creek, you see all this stuff and it looks really bad, but the actual concerns for the fish and the wildlife are probably coming mostly from the housed community, and that the data don't really necessarily support that it's the issue. So I'm wondering if anyone in this room, it sounds like there's about to be some water quality sampling. Has there been any water quality sampling yet? And what are other people finding thus far?
I know this will be the first time that the city of Santa Rosa is specifically looking at encampments for these particular things. So they're pretty excited about that collaboration. But Chris, it looks like you know more about this. Oh, you are still muted.
Yeah, I just had two things. One was to respond. Yeah, we haven't really sampled for that specifically, but one of the issues that some of us really are focused on is that this is looking at this in a more holistic way, in the sense that, yes, there's this assumption that encampments can affect the water quality, but folks living there are also affected by the water in the creeks. And for us, it will be, from the house community, or even more likely, depending on where they are, fertilizer runoff from wineries and farms will be affecting their quality of life. And so that's probably going to be the big signal we find. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The other thing I wanted to point out is that both Dawn and Mike have joined the meeting. And so if we wanted to have them say anything, they could. Should we start with Mike, you think?
So if I could ask Mark Gondry one question, because he actually has to take off. No,
Sorry.
that's great. So I just wanted to get this one question to him before he has to leave. It happens to be your question, Chris. So you mentioned you were talking about transitioning from a test environment to a production environment. Do you want to talk about that a bit with him?
Oh, no, I just wasn't sure what people, I was just trying to compliment Mark a little bit. Yeah, so having a test environment working and then having a production environment working, which is more hands-off, I just wanted people to know that that can actually be a big issue at SSU, because it requires different levels of processing and different levels of approval by IP. And so just to put in the back of our minds going forward, the discussion of whether to next year step up the production model at SSU, or to make the leap all the way and ask Mark to step up a hosted solution is something we should probably think about a little bit, and involve Mark in that discussion too. But it's been a lot of work, so just basically throwing out a compliment.
If anybody else has anything from Mark, this is the time. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it is quite a lift. Thank you all for your attention. I'm sorry that I have to run. I have class.
Thank you, Mark.
Cheers, Mark.
Bye.
And yes, I would love to hear from Dawn and Michael Thompson. So Mike, I think your time might be a little limited. Dawn, yours is as well. So do either of you have to take off soon?
Yeah, actually, I do. I've got a field crew I abandoned who has nothing but questions for me. But yeah, I'm sorry I missed the presentations, and hopefully it's recorded. I'd love to circle back and see. What I'd love to just talk about briefly is just some of the things we've been encountering this year, mostly in North County between Hillsburg and Cloverdale, an area that's kind of outside of a lot of your purview. And the thing that's popped up, it started late last year and it really exploded this year, is homeless encampment fires along waterways. And so just briefly wanted to share that we've been working with North Sonoma Fire and the resource agencies and City of Cloverdale, City of Hillsburg, and the fire departments on coming up with mitigation strategies. And up in Cloverdale, they've really had a fire problem. They've had a serial kind of fire bug and also just fires within camps. Last year, it was an argument between two campers that led to a large fire, and these are all right on the edge of town. And certainly the prevailing winds are of great concern because it would drive it into town. And so what we did, and a lot of this was driven by evictions in other areas, concentrating homeless people, upsetting the kind of interpersonal dynamics, if you will, and creating tension within the community. So what we have been spending a lot more time than I anticipated this summer is on doing some fire treatments and limbing trees, getting rid of invasive vegetation. And we were successful in working with both the Water Board and Fish and Wildlife to get guidelines from them about how we could do that work without securing permits, because there was absolutely no funding to do this work. And then down in Hillsburg, we had already been scoped out and started a project with Hillsburg Fire Department to start working on a rondo there, where we've had a number of fires in the encampments, mainly by the Sire plant and Memorial Bridge. And there's camps right within town in the Arundo, and it's an invasive plant. It's that stuff that looks like bamboo along the river. It's actually a giant reed. And what we've learned as we've kind of gotten into this project, actually been drawn in by the fire department, is just one, this is a great source of water loss to the river, but the bigger issue that we're addressing it for is really the amount of BTUs that are produced. When this stuff burns, it's got almost 4 to 6 times the biomass of most native vegetation. And what we're seeing is that what we've learned from a lot of work other people have done, mainly on the Santa Ana River, where they have repetitive fires in homeless camps, is just the plant structure. One, it's hollow stem, it's vertically oriented, and it just is a natural chimney. Once you light it on fire, it goes up fast and it burns extremely hot. And the fire department here in Hillsburg has had to use firefighting foam, which is not good for firefighters of the river. So we're actually working with donor supplied funds from some of our generous donors to actually start eradicating that, and working with some farm workers, which we've trained to do fire prevention and climate resiliency work. So in addition to our normal taking out the trash with the homeless community on the river, we're kind of trying to work with, and the crazy thing is as we've been focusing more on Arundo, the homeless people have actually been planting it to create screening in their camps. So we're actually working to educate them that this is not something that's desirable. It's certainly something we're going to be eradicating. So the sooner you stop spreading it around, the better for everybody. And but that's kind of what we've been focused a lot on. And the other thing is the homeless camping ordinance that was just passed by the county. Most of our work occurs along the main stem of the Russian River, which is almost entirely within county jurisdiction, except for the city of Cloverdale and Hillsburg. And just been having a lot of discussions with the sheriff's department about whether they're going to enforce that, how they're going to enforce it. And just we look at it as a positive because every summer there are people, especially in the Hillsburg area, who literally camp right next to the river, right at the water's edge. So we're hoping that this is a tool to get people to move back away from the water and potentially reduce the issue of trash and other things associated with the camps. And also the closer there the water, the more effort we have to expend to go collect the trash every week. So certainly moving them a little bit further away benefits, I think, the waterway, and also just makes our work a lot more efficient. So we're kind of scratching our head, wondering how this is going to manifest as they roll that out.
Don, could you just really quickly tell people your organization and your role?
Oh, pardon me. Sorry about that. You can tell I'm in a hurry today. My name is Don McInhill. I work for Russian River Keeper. I'm the director, and we run a program called. We have five staff that work on trash 5-6 days a week. We do community cleanups. We run the annual Russian River watershed cleanup with a lot of support from people on this call, like Andy Rogers, Russian River Water Association, Sonoma Water, and others. And we also run what's known as the Clean Camp program. And we work with homeless community members along the Russian River and in some of the creeks like Mark West Creek, and teach them how they can camp outside and kind of carry out their lives without trashing the river, and then back that up by providing bags, supplies, and weekly trash pickups to about 220 homeless people living along the waterways.
I just
So,
wanted to say thank you for bringing up how this intersection of environmental challenges like invasive species interact with social challenges like homelessness, environmental challenges like fire and water quality. It just really feels like you're in the same space that we're trying to work in, and I'm really appreciative of you bringing that all up.
Yeah,
that-
it's Arundo is actually, the more we've focused on it in the last 8 months, it is a favored camping location because it's non-native. Insects don't use it. So if you want to go somewhere, you camp in the willows, you're going to get spiders all over yourself and all kinds of other bugs that utilize those riparian species for, to nest and live and catch bugs and things. And also it creates these really dense stands that hide the homeless camps, and they can easily go in with a machete or something and just hollow out these giant stands and create a little campsite area. So it's something that talking to the folks on the Santa Ana River Authority down in Inland Empire, in Santa Clara River, LA River, you name it, they've got more Arundo than we do, more homeless people, and they're experiencing the same thing. Seeing this intersection of this invasive species being utilized by the homeless community. And it kind of takes me back to one of the early meetings of this initiative, where I think it was that behavioral scientist talking about the African watering hole and why people would choose to live along waterways. They can choose a place where they can observe their surroundings, be hidden, and Arundo is just a great vehicle for that.
And I know that Chris has his hand up, but I also know that Emily has to leave, and there was one question for her, so I'm hoping to squeeze that in. And the question was about what does humanize the homeless mean in these communications campaigns and media campaigns? Does that include videos and interviews of people?
Yeah, that's one idea that my group had last year, was to do that. But I think also just this idea that you know, the homeless population isn't this stereotype you see in the media, right? They're your neighbors, they're going to school with your kids. They are, you know, many people in Sonoma County are only one paycheck away from being homeless. And so I think just thinking about it from, you know, these are not all people who are drug addicts and have mental health problems. And I think that that is like the stereotype that people think of when they think of the homeless population, and sort of flipping that on people and being like, these are your neighbors. These are, you know, sure, some people have mental health issues, sure, some people have addiction problems, but also there's plenty of people who are just homeless because they lost their job, or they were leaving their spouse who was abusive, or whatever that might be.
One thing that
right?
your students identified was actually the fires, the environmental challenges going on right now have
Yeah.
another reason that someone might experience homelessness. So
Right.
thank you for answering that. Sorry to interrupt the flow of that other conversation. Thanks for joining us, Emily. So yes, back to Dawn, what Dawn was saying, Chris.
I know you have to take off soon, Don. I was just hoping, can you remind everyone what the housing ordinance that was passed says, basically?
Yeah, homeless, well, the camping ordinance, because and
Right.
one thing, you know, along the lines of Emily and what she just said, you know, people camping on the river, not just homeless.
Right.
You know, we go up to Preston along Geysers Road, and all summer long, it's people from Santa Rosa, San Jose, coming up for a free camping spot on the Russian River, and often leave all their trash behind and create the same issues as homelessness. So, you know, but what the ordinance is about is really trying to identify areas that are more sensitive. And it's a county ordinance. Cloverdale passed a similar ordinance just about 2 weeks ago, I believe. And it's about not allowing or you know, for lack of a better word, criminalizing camping near schools, daycare centers, and along waterways. And I believe the wording of the county ordinance, and correct me if anyone on the call is might have it in front of them. I think it's 150 feet from the ordinary high water mark of the waterways, which is, you know, as Carol, who runs our Clean Camp program, she said, wow, that's pretty much all of downtown Guerneville. But,
Right.
you know, the whole idea is to not outlaw camping, because we have Martin versus Boise, which really, you know, prevents outright criminalizing camping, but to try and use it as a tool to move people away from these areas where there would be a greater conflict, like waterways or schools, and, you know, allow them to camp in other areas where there is less of a potential conflict with you know, either waterways or kids going to school, et cetera. I think parks are another spot, because we've seen some of the public parks. There's one along Santa Rosa Creek, I'm blanking on the name, up by the hospital,
Right.
that, you know, literally became a de facto campground. So, you know, but it should be posted on, I think it was passed 3 weeks ago at the Board of Supervisors, and I'm not sure it's out yet, but you know, anywhere else than the board agenda minutes and all those documents that go along with the Board of Supervisors meetings. But it has not been implemented, it has not been enforced yet, but we're hoping it can be a potential tool to, you know, where people will not voluntarily move back from the waterways, that we might be able to get them, to compel them to move away from the waterways, just to reduce those conflicts.
Thank you.
All right. Michael Thompson, welcome. Glad you could join us. We would love to hear, I know you couldn't see the presentations today, so responding to them would be impossible. But you were there to see the virtual research gallery, so you might know some preliminary results. And just how has this whole process been for you as one of our main partners? And is there any question that you have for us or for the researchers?
Yeah, actually, there are a couple questions. And I'll I'll do the quick introduction since I learned from Don that so I'm Mike Thompson, Assistant General Manager with the Sonoma County Water Agency, and as Claudia and I realized, this is our 10th year of working together, and it's really been a great partnership. And I think in particular, just working with Sonoma Straight's been just great. Where I think I would say myself and at Sonoma Water, we're big, advocates of, of education of all types, and especially when it comes to water and natural resources. I think and everyone on the call, I think that's a passion we have. And and if I can, I just would like to speak back to kind of the roots of this idea of looking at homelessness from a water perspective. That's something I know Andy, Chris, Claudia, and I talked about. And the question, one of the first questions we are asking was, how much are public agencies currently spending addressing the impacts of homelessness that, water resource on water resources? And is there a better way to more efficiently spend our funding? And I guess that, again, not having seen the presentation earlier, one of the questions I would have is, will there be a way to move the work we're doing to help us as public agencies make better use of the funds that we're currently spending addressing homeless people, addressing the impacts of people with homelessness?
So Mike, I think that's a key question. And it's one that in the first year was one of the goals of the team that did the interviews with the organizations to create a knowledge map. And it was followed up on, there was a presentation today about following up with some of those interviews, because part of the interviews were, how much are you spending on these different aspects of your work? And then another part of it is to let those organizations know about each other so that when someone starts the work and then the grant ends, someone can pick it up instead of start from scratch, things like that. So definitely one of the goals for that team was exactly what you're saying. There were some challenges. You'll see the presentation that it's really hard to get people to be interviewed about some of these challenging, sensitive topics. And so one of the ideas next year is to actually go sit in offices until someone talks to you instead of call and email.
Yeah.
It's after COVID now, students can go to the office and sit there because it really was challenging to get people to respond. So there's still work to be done, but there's a goal. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, and I just wanted to sort of make the point to Mike in terms of that, since I don't think he was here for this comment, but some of this assessment that we've done across agencies and individuals throughout the county, one of our next steps would be to take that and turn it into a report or an appendix for you and for the Board of Supervisors, because they did commission a study about homelessness from a big consulting firm, KPMG. And some of that information could actually help the county plan and coordinate for future efforts. And so we do have that in our mind, and I'm going to be touching on that in a little bit.
Thanks.
Did you have any other questions, Mike, or anything else you wanted to say before I let Linnea take a turn, because she just was able to join us?
No, I say I'd love to hear from Linnea.
Hi, Linnea.
Hi.
You came at the exact right time. Mike just got done speaking, and we would love to know if there's anything that you would like to share or ask. I know you haven't seen the presentations, but anything in general.
Well, I guess I want to say that I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be here for the entire time. Too many things to do at once. So trying to do everything means missing a lot at the same time. And I guess I'll just express gratitude for the continued thought around these efforts and allowing space for health and well-being of the folks who are impacted to be a part of the conversation.
And could you just quickly tell us who you work with and what your role is?
I sure can. Sorry. It's just taking it for granted that I see a lot of familiar faces. My name is Linnea Cyberlick-Wheeler, and I'm a clinical social worker, associate director of behavioral health for West County Health Centers, and I am currently sitting in Gordonville.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for joining us when you could. I think that is all of the steering committee members who will join us. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to any other audience question. Let's see if I have any on the list, but otherwise feel free and raise a hand or type into the chat. We do probably have another 15 minutes or so before Chris needs to wrap up if we have questions for that. So one thing that was noted, and this is actually about Daryl's presentation. So this is the field and interview team, and Daryl's unfortunately not here because of an emergency. But one thing we noticed on his slides is that he mentioned that both health and housing organizations don't have an issue with collaboration. And we were like, what does that mean? Because we found collaboration to be actually really difficult. And it could be, you know, maybe that they want to collaborate. So they don't have a problem doing it. We'd like to do it. Maybe it's that's what it means. But I also was wondering about that and wanted to point out to folks that we've had other feedback that collaboration is not easy. And that's actually one of the bigger challenges. So I didn't want anyone to get confused about that point on the slide. Another question or a comment for Daryl's team was how to get community partners involved with the students on the next part of that pilot project. So if anybody has ideas about that, please let us know, because it was kind of a self-run team, which was really interesting, but we did learn a lot about what did and didn't work. And so if there's any ideas from the steering committee or ways that you'd like to get involved with that group, there's still more to be done there. All right.
I think what's interesting about that too is I know that Katie pointed out that they work with houseless folks doing restoration plantings, and I know that Dawn works with houseless folks to help clean up encampments and stuff like that. And so it would be great to start getting sort of lead houseless folks in various organizations helping us to do some of this work. I think that'd be an interesting exploration.
And isn't that part of the social entrepreneurship idea? Or it's, right? There was something about getting the folks affected involved, I remember, in those student presentations.
Yeah, absolutely. And also in the media campaigns, interviewing people with their stories and making everybody realize that, you know, they're but for the grace of God, you know.
Oh, here's a question. Can we think about an eventual road show to be created about this program? Could be a scripted and recorded Zoom meeting that's shared 12 to 15 minutes, or a series of shorter ones. Well, I wish Emily were here. She had some media study students that actually specialize in videos and the newsroom and interviewing. And they are on the committee, on the Primitivo team this year that's working with us. So I will definitely run that by them. I've thought of that as well, and I really like that idea. Andy, is there anything you wanted to add to that comment?
No, it kind of dovetails on my earlier comments. That's also a tangible, asset of this program that could be made available. Yeah.
Claudia, you've been typing, but you haven't been saying anything out loud. Is there anything that you wanted to say?
No, I've actually been taking notes. What I'm hearing really is, we've taken a while to get going and have really hit some milestones and have done a lot of work to get, some answers to these questions. And I think for us to hit the bullseye at the end of year 3, I'm hearing from Andy and Mike and other folks, something usable. What does this thing look like that is now usable by the community, is now really a tool and has that meaningful impact? So I've been taking notes about, thinking about that as we go along, some ideas. And I think that probably our next step is to make sure that we're all on the same page. So we can write up a thing saying, this is what we think is coming and coming in May. And then we can go from there and just make sure the steering committee says, yeah, that would really be useful.
Great point, Claudia. One thing I see is that you've been giving me props and Chris about leveraging additional projects on campus without additional funding needs. Thank you for noting that.
Yeah, I did want to say that one of the great things about this is that we have a certain budget that is focused on hiring faculty student teams. And that's really important because, as you can see, faculty have different interests, not necessarily. There's nobody on campus who has a specific interest in water quality and homelessness. So it's really important to provide that kind of resource that you get the expertise you need, and then that group applies their expertise to this problem. So that's great. I think it's really important to have that cadre who's really on task doing the questions that we originally had. But it's wonderful to see Carrie and Chris are always going around campus and engaging other classes in this, and the word is getting out on campus. And so we've been able to leverage other projects in addition to the original ones that were originally funded. So it's very exciting for us, on the side of creating educational experiences and, trained workforce as we actually do have a trained workforce now. There's some people. The other thing we could do, Andy, is we can come up with a list of success stories. What are they doing now?
Mm-hmm.
That would be a good document.
Yeah, keep these ideas coming. These are great. And if one pops up in the middle of the night tomorrow, you just type it to us. I would actually at this point like to double check, let's reframe our brains for just a moment and think as an audience, where could we take this next? What is actionable? What could help it be actionable in your mind, in your field? What would you like a faculty student team to pick at a little bit more based on what's already been done? Does anybody have anything they'd like to share along those lines?
I can pop up with some of the ideas I had.
Mm-hmm.
If we have just a few minutes.
Yeah.
What I heard was that there was a lot of interest surrounding the shared software, and that people see it as something that would be useful. So I think by the end of this year, we need to have something that's functionable, that people can actually, sign up for. And at least if it's not the whole thing, then it's just the bathroom part. It's just one resource instead of as many as we would like. So I heard that is a key deliverable, and we should really focus on what we might be able to do to get that wrapped up and made available.
Yeah, I heard that too.
I also heard that some of the resources that are already there, we need to get them out in a format that people see as usable. So we have reports, like we have, how can we provide new restrooms in different places? We have a whole report on that and what they would cost, what it would cost, what are the pros and cons of these different kinds of solutions. So I'm thinking that some kind of infographic, something really simple that people could say, oh, here are pros and cons of each of these options, and to get those to people that need them. So that's, like tight that, and they can always go to the report, link to the report. So some of that is like just the report part. And then I heard for the media piece, yeah, they're on the folder, but a media kit, something that says, hi user, here's what we have that's available here. And to get that to key people, to say, here's your useful kit of resources for addressing issues. It's all packaging, a lot of this is what we have. And then for the final one, I was seeing how much are we spending and how can we leverage existing resources of things that we're spending. We have this amazing directory with 150 organizations and what they do. we followed up with a group of them. We need to fill that in and do interviews with all of them to say, what exactly are you doing? But I'm also seeing that really this idea about how can we leverage existing resources is a working group question. And so it might be that for that piece, we need to really brainstorm about, do we need to bring people together? Do we need to try to bring those 150 people together and engage them in a room of saying, write down how much you think you're spending on this? And, I don't know, maybe that's we need a different format. We were doing a lot of the background effort and footwork, but we could also consider other formats for really engaging and talking about new ways to allocate resources. So that's where my mind is going, is how can we package it better and to make it usable? And did that spark any ideas from people?
I see Michael Magdisi.
Yes, thank you. I love all of those ideas, Claudia. That I ditto them all. The two thoughts that kind of sparked in my mind was, there was previous mention of a water quality report, and you said making reports useful or available. And just wanted to reiterate my own interest in just seeing what the water quality report might look like in the future. I know that that's a plan for the future, but I would be interested in that and having that available. The other one is, there was a talk about the costs of doing nothing. And conceptually, I can understand it, but it would be, I think, helpful to see a case study. Where has it occurred where a county or a government did nothing, and what were their costs? I think something like that, just watching county government operate over the last 5 to 6 years, I think solid information like that could potentially have an effect on decision makers' ability to allocate resources. Because a conceptual idea of it is one thing, having a case study showing this actually happened is another thing. And it's a little bit, having concrete proof of something that happened maybe can help move the dial.
That is actually one piece that's included in a quite long MBA dissertation that was done after the year one, as the year one results.
Okay.
And one piece of it is a citation filled page of the cost of doing nothing. So it gives examples of each of those situations that I brought up, the Clean Water Act, disputes, and the hepatitis A outbreak. And so definitely I'll make sure that you get that document and then tell us where you would like even more information too. And it's ironic that the entire report was drafted as a case study. So, but yes, definitely, we thought that could be very powerful too. That's one thing that we were asking the media studies campaign to highlight a lot of, because it could move the dial. Andy, do you have a thought?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. I definitely want to, or second or third Claudia's list. That'd be wonderful. The other things that kind of came to mind and sort of made notes during the meeting today, I'm fascinated to hear, how this work could inform or gain, actually both ways, with the KMTG work that's going on with the county. I mean, what a cool story that there's, this professional effort, and then there's this effort that is professional with different perspectives and being additive. So that's really cool. But one of the things that occurred to me is that, this is an unusual, at least in my water world, this is an unusual collaboration here. And, it's great to be, especially in some of the early large meetings where we had law enforcement and housing and, a lot of the other folks that not necessarily have been regular kind of steering parts, but those are still elements that can be folded in the future. Those two in particular, but this is kind of a university agency partnership model that's been built that, as described, could be useful to other areas. We'll obviously keep developing this. So that also is a pretty cool deliverable that we could offer, other areas. So just wanted to share that the work that's been done here, the bit of the roadmap or journey on the river journey that we've been on, it's been very useful. We have gone somewhere, and that's useful to capture and tell that story.
Andy, thank you so much for speaking to basically the goal of our Education into Action program, connecting community partners with students to tackle things just like this that are rather innovative. I have to say, Claudia has developed an incredible system for this, and Chris has really pushed it to where it is now. And, and now I'm trying to help bring it even more forward. So it's so, I can't tell you how rewarding it is. Like, all these students, just like Mark said, Kyle was kind of scared. He was not used to not having a correct answer to reach, right? This is a real problem. No one knows the answer yet. And he got to be a part of that. And so the shaping of minds at the same time as getting to answer smaller, more complicated questions that maybe agencies don't have time to deal with. That's really what we love doing. So thank you for that. We actually do have another topic that we've started investigating in this same format called Fire Up. And so this is, instead of water and homelessness, talking about fire on the landscape. So that's another one coming your way. We don't actually have a ton more time. So I think Chris or Claudia, if you have anything to reply to Andy about, other than that, if Chris wants to give us some next steps and our wrap up, I think we're about ready for that.
Dang it, I'm muted again. Yeah, thanks for that, Andy. I think the one thing that I should at least make the steering committee aware of is there is a sort of a newfangled interdisciplinary study conference taking place in November, where we're actually going to be highlighting this particular collaboration and trying to get the word out. And maybe one of these workshops, it would be worth us highlighting the changes that are having to be made on campus to make these things, make these collaborations work, and challenges of working with faculty in silos, because they can get interesting to work with and work around. So, but we've had some good luck with some of our newer faculty and engaging them and trying to make a difference. And I just wanted to reiterate, next steps, to Andy's point and Mike's point. We would like to synthesize some of our findings and fold them into this big professional KPGM or PMG report, and to start working more closely with the Board of Supervisors. And part of that discussion will be presumably standing up this production instance of the bathroom locations and the shower locations and this resource mapping question. And so we'll probably engage the steering committee on that. Part of that discussion will be, should we do a transition model where we have part of it at SSU, or should we just go all the way and have one of the agencies host this year on year and students just come and help populate it with community members? There's pros and cons both ways.
Chris, can I ask you a quick question? Actually, it's maybe a question Andrea may know the answer to. And maybe all do, are the Community Development Commission the kind of the one who takes the lead with addressing homelessness at the county level? Or Michael, do you know that? I'm not sure.
So I've been here about 2 months.
I know. That's why I was throwing it out. I wasn't sure if you would, and looks like Andrea has left. And so anyways, that's something, I don't know if And I just don't remember, how much have we engaged with the Community Development Commission? Because I think they are like the lead in that
Okay.
area.
Okay,
So we might want to engage with them a little more.
okay,
I think that they're the lead in terms of funding, but not in terms of action.
So even that
Yeah.
though, I mean, even if they're even more reason, if they're the ones who are lead in funding, then let's talk with them.
yeah, good point. Now that we actually have something to implement.
Yeah, well, and I'm just
That's really
wondering,
concrete.
I'm also thinking in terms of presentations and roadshows, and they might be one of the, like a great one to give a presentation to.
Mm. Okay,
And
And
they-
if,
Oh, sorry, Michael, when you're done, I have a
yeah,
comment.
I was just thinking that they might be in some ways as good or better to go to first before the actual Board of Supervisors level.
Okay.
Because I know it works a lot better if you get staff involved as opposed to having it, you know, so that they're already aware and they would know what's going on before you go and talk to the
Right.
board. Because if it comes from the board down without them being involved, you're starting with 1 foot in the hole. So, and they may have us, I'm sure they know they'd be able to provide value added when we start talking to our board and other elected officials in the area.
yeah, good point.
What I want to add is that the Community Development Commission makes sure that we have a continuum of care, which is a requirement for the funding that gets funneled through the Community Development Commission to homeless services. And so that continuum of care meeting is likely a good venue for this presentation. It will include county employees, but also all of the homeless service agencies will have a representative.
Oh, okay.
I believe there's a meeting coming up in November that I'll be attending. I don't know what it takes to get on the agenda these days, but I can send somebody the contact information
Okay.
if that sounds of interest.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you could,
Okay. Should I
yeah,
just
send
send it
either
to you,
me.
Chris?
yeah, or Carrie.
Or
either one.
Carrie? Okay.
Yeah.
Or both.
Or everyone? Let's just reply all.
Yeah, right. No, that's great. Thank you for that. Yeah, so we'd like to stand up that instance. The other, thing we're going to be asking for advice on is this idea of expanding some of the business programs we have in the county. So the idea was, I think you guys weren't here for this presentation, but some of the business students were talking about this idea of purpose-driven corporations. And
Right.
I don't know if you guys know and so we took that a little bit and pushed on it a little bit. And the idea is to sort of expand the Go Local or the Green Business Program to sort of bust those open and say, what if for every business you got a 1% or 2% discount on your groceries or whatever they are, and then that money is pooled and we direct them to some of these wicked problems within the counties? What would that look like? And so it would be interesting to frame that using some business students and some business leaders like the Chamber of Commerce to see if it's really got legs. And it looks like Michael has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. It reminded me when you were mentioning that before during your presentation. There is been a new branding that just took off last month. Respect Russian River. I believe District 5, Elise, was working on that. I don't think that they're the only district involved, but it's the Russian River Confluence, and it's this new brand.
Right.
And it just made me think of that. And I thought, if you're going to be working on something that it's very similar, it's trying to get local businesses involved. They have a whole bunch of swag, basically, that they're trying to get I believe, the businesses to participate in, to raise the awareness of the group and to raise the awareness of the river and the issues around the river. And I don't know if it would overlap at all, but I just wanted to mention it because it might be something that would work well with what you're talking about, because they're similar, it seems.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's, you know, it goes back to this, and it goes back a little bit to Emily's social media campaign. Your comment reminds me about that a little bit, in the sense that Sonoma County is a great place to live and work because there are so many organizations that are trying to help in so many ways. But it's also a hard place to live and work because there's so many organizations trying to work in so many ways, and everybody's got their hands up saying, look at me. And it's like, you almost want to organize them all into one lump, and raise money for each other together, in some way. And I don't know if that's possible or not, but it's really tough to try to get people's attention on your particular cause. But yeah, I think, thank you for that. We will definitely reach out to them. Yeah. So I've mentioned the KPGM report, PMG report, and the software. Three other things I'd like to mention before we leave. One is, as Carrie mentioned, we are planning water quality sampling this year, both effects of water quality on homeless encampments, but also potentially seeing if there's a link between homeless encampments and water quality. And Professor Jackie Guilford has been working with Sean McNeil and Matt St. John from the North Coast Water Quality Control Board to outline that and to start doing that. And this was originally what we were going to do before COVID shut us down. So we're kind of circling back after we've laid all of this groundwork. The other thing I've been doing, and this has been an interesting process, is SSU is good, or we're good at real world projects and getting faculty and undergraduate students involved in real world projects. There's a university back east that has a West Coast presence, Lehigh University. They're pretty well known. And they have a lot of graduate students, and their purpose in being out here is to get their engineering graduate students involved in some of these issues. And so we've been working for quite a while trying to develop a grant with Lehigh to create these mobile power systems that can go around and help individuals experiencing homelessness, recharge their portable power systems, maybe give them enough power for cooking, maybe filter some water. And the reason for that, as pointed out by Dawn in one of our first meetings, was that one of the big things they deal with is discarded batteries along the river, just tons and tons and tons of batteries. And so this is a way of dealing with that. The challenge in working with Lehigh has been actually to find a car manufacturer willing to donate their used electric vehicle batteries. So typically in a car, once your battery can only hold 80 or 90% charge, they call it done and they replace it. And then we want to get those batteries and repurpose them because they still have a lot of useful life. And so trying to find a manufacturer to donate that, but that's a work in progress. I can give a presentation about that if anyone would like. And then finally, we'd like to mention that this is really at the moment, we are up for funding again next year. We're with the Sonoma County Water Agency, or Sonoma Water. So this is our last full year of funding of Rising Waters. And so we're going to be looking to talk to the water agency and also our other partners about how to frame this and what our needs actually are, and continuing the study next year to try to continue to help the county. So those are the items we have planned on coming this year. But as Claudia said, we always get different faculty and students involved in different projects. We try not to simply restrict to what we think we need. And that's been a very successful strategy. So are there any questions?
Chris, I'll just say that I'm glad you're thinking like that. Timing is kind of the essence with that. We need to be pretty mature in that way in the next month or two.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you, everyone, for Carrie, for convening us. This has been a really good conversation. It's always great seeing you all.
Thank you all. It has been such a fun ride and we're still going. So again, we're here if you have more questions, comments, ideas. So great to have connected to everybody today. And I think that'll wrap it up for us all. For those of us who don't know the Center for Environmental Inquiry, do take a look at our website, cei.sonoma.edu, cei.sonoma.edu. I slurred there a bit. We have events all the time. If you're near SSU campus, we have a bird event today at 7 p.m. Come on campus. So anyway, just stay in touch. Thanks for all the work that everyone here is doing in your respective roles. And we'll see you next time.